What is one secret your parents can never know? I can never tell them that my number one goal as a parent is to handle relationship issues differently than they did. They went through an extremely messy divorce when I was 8 and my only memory of them together is them screaming at each other and my sister and I hiding in our rooms. Then it was 10 plus years of them talking shitty about each other to us, putting us in the middle of all their arguments, and giving us a huggy guilt trip whenever they felt like we were spending more time with the other one than with them. It's been 20 years now and my mom will still talk shitty about my dad and stepmom every once in a while, despite me asking her over and over to stop. I am happily married, but if I were to ever get divorced I will never put my daughter in the middle of arguments, speak badly about her father to her, or make her feel guilty for having a relationship with him. It's the number one thing I learned from my parents and I think they would be devastated to realize the true effect it has had on me. One time I dropped an entire roll of toilet paper into the bowl when trying to change it. I didn't want them to know I ruined an entire roll, so I hid it in my closet and over a course of a few weeks I would rip away pieces and throw them away. Edit. Since some people seem to be assuming my parents were horrible and I was frightened, that's definitely not the case. I was just a dumb kid that was embarrassed about dropping a whole roll in the toilet. How to use a computer. Apparently, my mother-in-law is the same way. She keeps getting viruses and asking us to fix it, even though we live 19 hours away, or buy her a new one. She recently started seeing a guy who's a gamer and has suddenly decided she wants us to buy her a gaming PC, even though the most advanced game she plays is Candy Crush. After my sis died I locked myself in her room and went through everything alone before her friends or my parents went through her stuff to pack it away or give it to her friends. I found naked pics, empty bottles of alcohol and a letter she had wrote, but I guess never gave, to her then boyfriend, telling him the story of how she was raped as a younger teenager. I threw everything like that out but kept that letter. It's been 12 years and I just found the letter again as I was packing up to make room for baby. I can't bring myself to throw it away. Good on you for being that filter. I shudder to think about people going through my shit after I die and finding all my skeletons. Is there an official term for this? Should this be a thing? I need to designate someone to do this, otherwise I'll ruin a lot of memories of me. Edit. A lot of people have suggested porn buddy. I'd get punched in the face if I went to my best friend and said, Larry, we've known each other a long damn time, let's be porn buddies. Surely we can come up with a better term that requires little or no explanation. When we were staying at a friend's place on holiday, my so and I accidentally broke a guest bed. Like, one of the legs gave way and the whole thing collapsed. It was an ultra cheap metal frame and so found a meat cleaver and we banged the bejesus out of that bed to get it back into shape. To no avail. I had to ring my friend and confess. Due to the conservative nature of my parents and their firm beliefs, we have allowed them to believe that we are chaste and good and would never actually have sex. Ew, gross. We haven't lied, but we have certainly been guilty of omission. We are getting married this year, and my friend with the broken bed is a bridesmaid and is working on her speech. So, when I was 6 or 7 we had Christmas with the extended family. One of my uncles was there, and I was always a bit afraid of him because he had done some time for a drug charge and just gotten out within the last year or two. Anyway, I walk into the kitchen at one point, and he is there with this giant wedge of cheese. He looks up and asks if I wanted any. I nod, because I f***ing love cheese. He says okay, but you cannot tell your parents because you'll ruin your dinner, they will get mad at me, and he slices me a few pieces. We eat in silence and then I leave, convinced that I was an accomplice in some terrible act with my ex-con uncle. To this day, I have never told my parents as to what would happen if they found out. Well, then they would know that the reason I didn't eat that one Christmas dinner in the early 90s was because I had already filled up on expensive cheese. Replaced bourbon from a priceless bottle of liquor with Evan Williams when I was 15. I found out later my parents were saving the bottle for their 50th anniversary. It was given to them by my great grandpa at their wedding. Still have 23 years to break the news. You have the internet. And 23 years to find a replacement. Put together a bang-ass collection of rare bourbon and an eloquent apology speech. He might be able to find the same bourbon honestly. Plus, bourbon doesn't age in the bottle. So it'll be the exact same shit. I'm pretty sure the statutes of limitations are up on this one. So why not? I was a JR in high school and had some friends into LAN parties who were seniors. But I couldn't really join them because my family was pretty poor and neither them or I could afford a computer for me to use at that time. So one day my older friends gave me one of their older PCs, Pentium 3, with a couple parts missing, RAM, HDD, that I could build out for myself. Now about 15 years later it's turned out to be a great jumping off point because now I'm a successful system administrator and love working in the IT field. And I owe it in many ways to that first computer I learned to build back up from scratch and make my own. Only they didn't give me that computer. We stole it from the high school. Sorry not sorry. I'm not that close to my parents. But as an adult I'm a lot mellower and recognize the fact that they're nice people who did their best. So, there's nothing that would be catastrophic for me if they found it out. But I'd be a little glum about the unnecessary trauma it had put them through if they ever found out how many people I've slept with. How many of them were dudes. Or the sheer quantity of drugs I did at one point. I totaled my first car when I was 16. They knew about that. They came to pick me up and talk to the police officer while I was moving things from my car to theirs. What they didn't know about was the liter of vodka in my trunk, which I quickly and quietly speed walked to my parents' trunk. Neither the cop nor my parents knew a thing. I very nearly shat my pants. Disclaimer. I did not drink and drive. The trunk was just the only place my parents never checked and I happened to be a rowdy teenager. I cross-dress. For context, I had talked to my parents for consult about my interest in becoming trans, MTF. And they literally just shut me out from everything. Like, no internet. No school. I couldn't even talk to friends or family until they somehow killed any remote feelings for it. It took a week of home boot camping on why no one would ever accept a transgender. Not even my parents. And how I would be alone for the rest of my life. Now I can't own anything that has a girl remotely in it, otherwise my parents will think I'm contaminated again. After a year of a bit of self-discovery, I just found out that I like pretending to be a girl with a penis. So I got that going for me. This may be a little more serious than most of the other replies I'm seeing. But I can never ever let my parents know how many times I've been sexually assaulted. It would absolutely destroy my relationship with them. And they would never look at me the same way. I feel that my father would blame me for them. And think much less of me. And my mother would just see me as a victim from then on. And likely develop some sort of guilt complex because she'd think she had done something wrong that I ended up in those situations. I say this here on Reddit only because it's nice to mention it to somebody. That many years ago I found that cigarette pack in your drawer. Dad, I'll never tell anyone that you smoke once in a while when life is too much to handle. Maybe when your 38-year-old patient dies of heart attack. Or when a mother of 3 gets a very bad skin cancer. Or when your daughter is depressed and seems to have lost any will to live. You've been good enough to stop smoking 20 smokes a day after 30 years of killer habit. And I'm proud of you. I can never tell you because you always want to be perfect in our eyes. You're not perfect, but you still are a great doctor and a great dad. Thank you. How bad my depression and anxiety are. We figured out what was up with me a few years ago. And it runs in my family. Having seen it in my dad. And being a nurse herself. My mom put me on antidepressants and whatnot so they know it's a lingering thing. What they don't know is that I think about suicide every day. And that my anxiety makes me push myself away from any so I get close to. I use alcohol, pot, and prescription drugs to make everyday life a little more bearable. Right now. I just hope I make it another 5 years. And we'll see what happens then. This seems stupid to even write, but I can never share with my parents where I stand on political issues. Opposite of a lot of stories I've seen on Reddit. I am actually more conservative than my mom and stepdad. They are about as far left as possible, and it's painful to hear them talk about things in their I smell my own farts manner. And I'm really just somewhere in the middle. But to them, it would be much more extreme. The closest I ever came to talking to them about this was the time I realized I really never could. And all I'd said was that if people would just take a step back, they would realize that both parties are broken and there is no one right answer. That did not end well. My parents are massive anti-military hippies. They don't know I was an officer in the United States Navy. 6 years. Fortunately, my parents aren't Facebook parents. So I had enough time that I could edit posts and pictures my friends posted so they didn't show up to family. I told them I had a busy job or a girlfriend or whatever to avoid going home for the holidays. I'm extremely surprised I pulled it off. When I was 16, I had woke up in the middle of the night to a feeling in my stomach. I brushed it off as bad gas or something and waited for it to pass. It didn't. I quickly realized I needed to poop at that exact moment. So I rolled out of bed, clenching my butthole, and zipped down the stairs. I Frankenstein walked through my kitchen and into the bathroom because I was reaching critical mass. Once I made into the bathroom, I turned and aimed my ass at the toilet, thinking that I was close enough to the seat. But I wasn't. Oh god, I wasn't. I sat down on the seat and it felt slippery. I had shotgun blasted the toilet with shit. And I was now sitting in my own shitty, still letting loose a torrent of shit. After I had finished and wiped, I rolled off the toilet and laid in the fetal position for a solid 10 minutes. Then I got up, cleaned off the toilet and wall behind it and made sure there was no shitty anywhere, and went back to bed. I'm 24 now and have never said a word. All in all, it was a shitty situation. My father is an extremely judgmental and conservative chaplain in the army. He can never know that my fiance and I have lived together for the last year and a half. We are getting married in July and just bought a house together, and apparently in his mind I am going to live alone in this great big house for the next 5.5 months. Sure, Dad. That's what's happening. We were staying in a province in the Philippines for a week-long vacation. Somehow, one of the local fishermen managed to net this hawksbill turtle that my dad bought for about $2 in pesos. We had it for a whole week and it was fun watching it swim in the ocean water with a nylon cord tied to its shell so it won't escape. When we were only a day away from leaving, my dad finally announced that the turtle shall be killed and eaten by the neighbors once we leave. I didn't take this very well, and I was very vocal about it. The night before we left, I secretly weakened its cord by partially severing it with a nail cutter. The morning after, me and my brother took it for an early swim. It promptly broke free and swam away. My brother was aghast, and I had to act like it too. Naturally, my dad was fuming and accused me, correctly, of setting it free. I said I didn't, and that it escaped by itself when it must have bitten the cord the night before. Lame alibi. 4 years later, the whole family still doesn't know that I did it on purpose. I just can't stand the thought of that poor turtle getting killed. So wherever you are, dear turtle, keep safe. I hope you repopulate the ocean with your other turtle friends and wage a war on those who try to eat you. This will come too late to ever be seen. That I was homeless for more than 2 years. During the recession from 2008 to sometime in 2010. I lost my job and eventually was kicked out of my apartment. I had a 10-year-old car that was paid off, so I lived out of that until I found a series of jobs cleaning houses, working in a recreational center part-time. Parents lived 1,000 miles away and I managed to keep a mailing address at a friend's so they never realized. It would have killed them that I didn't want to ask for help. I wanted to do it on my own. Well, I'm a 20 years old son of a Muslim family living in a Western country. I am gay. The only reason I moved out into my own apartment was because I have a boyfriend. My mother knows I'm gay but says it's a sin and doesn't want to talk with me anymore until I go straight again. My father does not know. He would probably kill me if he knew. Stroke. But I enjoy every minute with my boyfriend and I don't give a FCK about my parents. That one of my childhood friends and I used to play with each other's penises. It was fun. And we liked it. I'm a married, straight guy. But this information would shorten their lifespan undoubtedly. Experimenting like that when you're young is common, natural, and harmless. Nothing to worry about. Edit. Let me clarify something here. Prepubescent kids fooling around and asking about each other's bodies is what's common, natural, and harmless. If someone is being taken advantage of, being manipulated, etc., or if the situation involves a kid and a teenager, adult, whatever, that is sexual abuse. I feel weird having to explain this, but apparently some people are confused. When you guys went to Hawaii, I put Milo, cat, down. He was sick. In incredible pain. Couldn't eat or drink. Couldn't even move to get to the litter box. When you left on vacation, he was too weak to even yell in pain anymore. I couldn't stand to see that cat in so much pain and so afraid, so I did the only thing I could do to help him end his life humanely. My parents were 100% against putting down a pet regardless of how much it is suffering, so they'd be beyond mad if they knew this. If my mother ever discovered that I own my own house, I'm quite certain I would very quickly acquire a 48-year-old child that frequently steals from me and would never ever leave. Thank God she lives a province over and doesn't own a vehicle. I feel bad sometimes because on more than on occasion she has been living out of a tent. But it's not my fault she bought crack instead of paying her rent. I'm sure it's not life and death. But I don't think I'll ever find the gall to tell my parents about this specific high school experience. My buddy inherited an apartment in the downtown area of our relatively suburban city. I use the term inherited loosely because it's not like his family died or anything. They just moved somewhere else and still had the lease paid for half a year. Anyways, as a bunch of 17-year-olds, we did the only logical thing. Turn it into a hangout paradise. Before college. Before officially moving out. We put in money to furnish the place. We hung out there every weekend. Word spread through school and us. Not so cool but not lame. Right in the casual middle type. Started throwing parties people showed up for. It was really great until we got so many complaints we got evicted. Good times. Come to think of it, someday I'll bring this story up at the dinner table. I'm late to the party, but when my wife and I first started dating we were both living with our parents. The only way we could get away was to book a hotel room and spend the night together. One of these nights we had gone out for dinner and we thought it would be a good idea to get some whipped cream to celebrate with. At the end of the night I brought it home and threw it in the back of the fridge and forgot about it. Fast forward to a few weeks later and my family is hanging out in the kitchen. My dad reaches into the fridge saying he wants a snack and pulls out the whipped cream. Before I could say anything he put the nozzle to his mouth and sprayed a bunch into his mouth. I can never tell him that the last thing that whipped cream touched was my dick. I was in Girl Scouts and was given a bunch of boxes of cookies to distribute to the people I sold them to. Naturally, once I was given the cookies I ate them. I immediately freaked out that people would call and rat me out after never receiving their cookies. I waited on pins and needles but no calls. I quit the Girl Scouts and he never told anyone. In my defense, I was raised on health food. No sugar, dairy, preservatives, etc. I was desperate. At this point, literally everything. My parents are the most disapproving, judgmental people I've ever met. Just about any time I tell my dad about anything I've done, he grills me about it, finds something tiny that I overlooked, and swears at me over it. My mother keeps telling me that she wishes I would make my own choices. And yet she also finds fault with everything I do when I take the initiative. They also constantly take out their frustrations with each other on me, then blame me for it. I'm one class away from graduating from college, so I'm taking it, applying for jobs, and trying to get as far away from them as I can, all while paying them back for paying for school. because I don't want them to have any more of a hold over me. When I was little, my dad used to travel for work a lot. Like 48 weeks out of the year a lot. I didn't mind. I wasn't his biggest fan when I was little. So, one night, when he was away on a business trip, my brother and sister, who are both older than me, were fighting. I heard my mom tell them that if they didn't stop, she wasn't going to tuck them into bed. I assumed she wasn't going to tuck me into bed either. I was probably 6 at the time. So I started crying. When she came in to say goodnight to me, she asked why I was crying. I was embarrassed. So I told her I was crying because I missed Dad. The next day, my dad sent me a bouquet of flowers and a cookie basket with a card that said I miss you too. I will never tell my dad that I didn't really miss him. I started having sex with my dad's girlfriend's daughter when I was 16 and she was 15. We didn't expect her mom and my dad to get married, but eventually they did, but we still FK'd for 3 years solid and lied about every boyfriend of hers and girlfriend of mine during that time. TBH, my dad would have said to stop, but my stepmom would have really flipped her shitty because she is pretty hardcore Christian and would have considered it incest even though we're not blood relatives. Throwaway account. Was hoping someone else would post something similar so I could read the responses instead of writing this. When I was 6 I was sexually molested by my older siblings. It only happened a few times and I think it was because they were going through puberty. But I had no idea it was a bad touch and they told me not to tell anyone. It's been about 2 decades now. I've moved on from it and I have only ever told one other person. I don't think there's any point in bringing it up with my siblings since we were children when it happened. My parents would be crushed so they'll never hear it from me. 4 years ago, my teenager friend was only a friend and had to move to another city. To anyone who knows Brazil, we lived in Mato Grosso do Sul, and she moved to Rio Grande do Norte. That's like 2,600 kilometers away. My mom used to hate her. Really hate her. Mostly because she knew I liked her. And she was jealous. Anyway, I traveled all the way to her city. With the help of my father. He bought me the tickets. Stayed there for 2 whole weeks. And came back. And she never knew about it. I told my mom I was going with a few friends. To a neighbor city. To spend the summer there. And she bought it. Even helped me pack my stuff. And gave me money. Also, my father doesn't know that my mother doesn't know I went there. SRY for any mistakes. English is not my primary language. I skipped a semester of class and alienated myself from my friends to work 3 jobs to help them make rent. My dad lost his job and was medically in a bad way. I bailed out of the house I shared with some friends to move back in with my parents under some flimsy pretext. Then I picked up extra hours at my 2 existing part-time jobs and got a 3rd. I told the family I was taking a lot of credit hours. Actually, I just stopped attending partway through the semester and couldn't get a refund because of timing. They would be devastated if they knew.